That trip to the Great Before definitely gave me some Mario Kart Rainbow Road flashbacks. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about Pixar's 2020 animated fantasy drama, Soul. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Soul stars the vocal talents of Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, and Graham Norton, and was directed by Docter. It tells the story of middle school music teacher Joe Gardner, who dreams of making it big as a jazz pianist. After an accident separates his soul from his body, he must find a way back to his life with the help of a cynical, unborn soul. It comes as absolutely no surprise, but Pixar's done it again. Honestly, it's remarkable how consistent the studio is with their output. Not only consistent in terms of frequency of their releases, but also consistent with the quality of those releases. They've had a couple missteps here and there over the years, but as I've said in the past, Pixar's worst is still pretty good in the grand scheme of things. But their best is straight up amazing, and they've had a lot of best movies. The studio has tackled a lot of subjects, but many of their films boil down to a what-if premise. What if a non-human thing had feelings and the ability for higher thought? What if it had a soul? Toys, bugs, monsters, fish, cars, robots, emotions, they've all had this what if applied to them. And now, with this latest Pixar film, we're faced with the ultimate what if. What if souls had souls? It sounds a little weird and overly meta on paper, but in practice, the question essentially translates to what is the meaning of life? And we thought Pixar had tackled some lofty concepts before. It's certainly a weighty theme and results in one of the studio's most thematically mature films to date, but it's handled so deftly that it doesn't feel as overwhelmingly massive as it really is. The writers at Pixar are incredibly skilled at taking these heavy, universal themes and producing something that's not only entertaining and moving, but also easily digestible and recognizable. Because the concepts are so universally relatable, everybody knows how these intangible things feel. But how do you represent those things in an animated film? Much like with Inside Out, Docter and the rest of the Pixar team managed to turn the intangible into something tangible. These esoteric concepts and feelings now have physical manifestations that make sense and are relatable and recognizable. Just like the memory orbs and personality islands in Inside Out were effective and clever ways of representing neuropsychological concepts, Soul is full of equally effective representations of existential concepts. Things like the Great Before and the preparation of new unborn souls, or the physical representation of what it's like to be in the zone and where you go when you're there. Perhaps the most impactful of these now tangible concepts was the idea of a lost soul, what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like. All of these things are clever world-building elements for the movie, but they're also important because they give us a tangible visualization of things we might otherwise have a difficult time really putting our finger on, even in real life. Through its visual representations and well-crafted story, Soul really tackles some big existential questions. Even though the question, what is the meaning of life, is never explicitly asked, the story revolves around the concept. It explores what a person's purpose in life is, and how that may differ from their perceived purpose. It looks at ambition and dreams and people's goals in life. And while most films covering that topic tend to boil down to a very positive, follow your dreams message, Soul explores both the positive and negative. Goals and dreams can be great. They can be motivating and fulfilling, but they can also be draining and consuming. And this movie explores that a little bit. It shows how being driven by a very one-track goal or dream can have unintended consequences. By shutting everything else out, you lose pieces of yourself, and in doing so, lose sense of who you are beyond your dream. You become only that dream, so even if you achieve it, it won't feel fulfilling, because nothing else is there. I know that sounds really intense for an animated film, but it works. So I realize that I'm now pretty deep into this review and have mostly just been talking about the existential and philosophical themes in intentionally vague, spoiler-free ways, so let me redirect to something a bit more traditional and talk about the characters. Soul is unique in this regard for a couple of reasons. First off, this marks Pixar's first film featuring an African American protagonist. It's kind of mind-boggling to think it's taken this long for that to happen, considering the studio's produced 23 movies in the last 25 years, but it's an important step, and hopefully a sign of more diverse representation in the studio's output moving forward. This film's also fairly unique for Pixar with regard to its lack of a child character. There have been a few Pixar movies without a kid. Cars, Ratatouille, Wall-E, but all of those still focus on fairly young characters. Or cute, naive robots. The protagonist of Soul, on the other hand, is a middle-aged man. I guess you could argue that 22 fills the kid role since she's an unborn soul and kind of acts like a teenager at times, but she's thousands of years old and has a very cynical view of what life is, something you don't usually see from kid characters. So it's an unusual pair of main characters for Pixar. I think it really works, especially given the material, but I do question the appeal and relatability for younger audiences. The mentor/teacher aspect of the story might lead them to gravitate towards 22, but I don't think they'll really be able to latch on to her and see themselves in her like they can with Riley, Miguel, Andy, or any number of other young Pixar characters. That being said, I do think Soul still has plenty to offer younger audiences. The intricacies of some of the more existential themes will probably go over their heads, but some of the base concepts and messages will still shine through. The second half of the story also offers some unpredictable goofiness, with an entertaining body swap subplot and some physical comedy that frequently borders on slapstick. And then, of course, we've got the animation, which will appeal to audiences young and old alike. Ever since Toy Story, Pixar has been on the cutting edge of CG animation, and frankly, they never disappoint when it comes to the visuals. Soul is a film of two distinct visual styles. The colorful, blobby animation in The Great Before is very reminiscent of the semi-amorphous character design found in Riley's mind in Inside Out, but much of the film takes place on Earth, or more specifically, New York City, and the animation for those sequences is much more akin to what we got in Toy Story 3 and 4. Parts of the design, especially the backgrounds, take on a very realistic style. I wouldn't say that they're quite to the photorealistic level that Toy Story 4 had, but it's pretty close. And while the characters themselves are very detailed and realistic, they've definitely still got that warm, cartoonish roundness to them. As I said before, Soul is one of Pixar's most thematically mature films. As such, it's probably going to be a film enjoyed and appreciated by adults more than by kids. It's certainly got an engaging and entertaining story, but I found it to be a fairly cerebral movie. One where, after watching, I found myself thinking about its themes and their application to my own life more than the actual story or characters. So it was kind of an odd first watch for me, because it had just as much heart and emotion as typical Pixar movies, and it certainly resonated with me and made me think, but I didn't feel as deep of a connection with the characters or their adventure as I normally do with Pixar. It might be a consequence of the lofty, thought-provoking concepts it explores, so I'm really curious to see what a second viewing yields for me. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro has definitely got to be the themes, as well as how some of the thematic concepts are physically represented. Pixar always explores pretty deep themes in their movies, and this time they tackle some of the ultimate existential questions. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? What happens after we die, or before we're even born? Those are some big, heavy concepts, but the film tackles them with the cleverness, relatability, and heart that we expect from Pixar. It takes esoteric concepts and feelings and turns them into tangible visual manifestations. It explores people's skills and passions and dreams, but also looks at what happens when you hyper-focus on those things. This movie's full of massive, weighty stuff, but makes it both palatable and easy to digest. Pro number 2 is the animation. This is a Pixar film, so this pro certainly isn't a surprise, but that doesn't make it any less impressive. The visuals here draw upon past Pixar films, especially during the Great Before sequences, but it still manages to have its own unique flair and style. The Earth sequences were especially impressive for me, blending classic staples of Pixar character design with a remarkably warm and real-looking New York City setting. On the con side, my issues with the film really boil down to just minor nitpicks. As much as I enjoyed the movie and its thematic revelations, I thought the first half was a bit stronger than the second. Maybe it's because I like world building and concept establishment, but I found the latter half of the film a touch unfocused. It went a little wild with the body swap subplot, and definitely took on a goofier, almost slapstick style of humor for a while. Kind of along those same lines, I didn't really like Terry all that much. I didn't find them very funny, and I would have preferred seeing more time spent building the relationship between Joe and 22 instead. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Soul or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Soul 4 out of 5 paws. I really enjoyed this movie, and while its themes and messages really resonated with me, I didn't feel the character and story connection that I usually do with Pixar. Then again, my first watch of Inside Out didn't hit me as hard as subsequent watches, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one eventually grows to a 4.5 on rewatch. I would recommend Soul to just about anyone. This movie deals with some heavy, universally relatable existential themes that I think make the film itself relatable for anybody. Whether you know what you want to do with your life, think you know what you want to do, or have absolutely no clue, this film has something for you to latch onto and draw meaning from. This is definitely one of Pixar's most mature films, and with its middle-aged protagonist, it might be a little harder for kids to really get into than the studio's typical output, but I think it's still got a lot that younger audiences will enjoy. If you liked Soul, I would recommend Inside Out. This is an obvious recommendation for a number of reasons. It's another Pixar film directed by Docter. It's got a similar animation style, and it too tackles weighty, heartfelt themes and uses clever world-building ideas to physically represent intangible concepts. If you're interested in another recent Pixar movie that deals with the afterlife, you've gotta watch Coco. Unlike Soul, it focuses on a child protagonist, but like Soul, that protagonist is a person of color and dreams of being a musician. If you want to step outside of the world of Pixar, you might want to check out A Matter of Life and Death. It's another film that focuses on the afterlife and a clerical error of sorts that results in somebody who should be dead being alive. Soul definitely drew a lot of inspiration from this movie, including the attempted retrieval of the errant soul, and most obviously, the visual of the escalator to the great beyond. And if you want some more animation mixed with jazz, I've got a bonus mini recommendation for you. Fantasia 2000, or more precisely, the Rhapsody in Blue segment of Fantasia 2000. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Soul? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie that deals with the afterlife? Or the before life? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insider information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.